Hey, I'm Zarina Matcha, and you're watching Non-Feminist Gal. I was not brought up to be religious, however, up until the age of about 15, I did believe in a theistical God. My parents did raise us to believe in some form of God, although this was certainly never imposed on us. They were always very open-minded. I always believed that there was a God in a creator sense, and I did pray fairly regularly. I also believed in astrology and went through a period of being very interested in astrology and reading quite a lot about it. I actually had this giant book from my school library that I just kept for ages, all about astrology and the signs and various points on your birth chart and so on. I also believed in an afterlife and some form of reincarnation with heaven. Like, I think for a while I believed that when we died, our spirit went to heaven and then stayed there for 7 years. Really weirdly specific, and then came back to Earth in a different life form. So yeah, I have very different ideas about heaven and the afterlife and the spiritual world and so on. I was fairly neutral towards religion as a child and into my early teens and didn't really have huge opinions on it. When I was 14, I briefly considered converting to Christianity and did attend my local church for a while and even joined a church youth group. After a few months, I realized that this wasn't really for me and I couldn't really get my head around the Bible and Jesus and all this stuff, which seemed a bit far-fetched. I never really vibed with the whole Christianity or organized religion thing. I've always been more of an independent thinker and didn't really like the idea of having to follow a strict manifesto for life and that sort of thing. But again, my parents were very laid back, very open-minded, just let us do our own thing and explore whatever we wanted to. Between the ages of 14 and 19, I went through a lot of depression, like many teenagers do, which was the result of being bullied for many years as a child and coming to terms with that and not really knowing how to really deal properly with my emotions. There were other things going on as well, including problems with my family and my parents' marriage dissolving and then separating, but I won't go too much into that. During the time of my depression, I lost all of my faith in God. I transitioned from being a theist, someone who does believe in a personified God, to an agnostic, and then to being a very staunch atheist. I rejected all of my prior metaphysical spiritual beliefs. I stopped believing in astrology. As far as I was concerned, it was all just complete nonsense. Whenever I was praying, I believed that God was not answering my prayers and that I had just wasted all of my time talking to myself in my head and that it was really just all a big lie. Reading The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins when I was about 15/16 really cemented my atheism. For a good few years, I adopted some fairly militant views on religion, although I wouldn't say I was ever overly extreme. I'm not a particularly dogmatic person. It was more that I was just full of a lot of anger and passion and a bit of resentment and started viewing religion as poison and that science and reason and empiricism was the only way forward and so on. When I was younger, like most young people, I was a bit more stubborn and adamant about certain things. I was also a feminist, although again, I was certainly never a militant feminist. I say that I had strong opinions, but I wasn't overly militant about them. It's more that I've always been quite an opinionated and rather headstrong person, and that can come across as militant at times, especially when you are very loud and talkative and quite vocal. But I have always recognized that these were my opinions and that my view wasn't necessarily the right view, it was just my view. I started watching atheist YouTube channels like Jacqueline Glenn, Dark Matter 2525, and The Amazing Atheist, who I loved and looked up to for many years. I used to watch all of his videos and I found him hilarious. I loved his humor and his intelligence and the way in which he phrased things. Watching his content always gave me a lot of joy, and I do feel really grateful for having consumed his content. Even though I've moved away from watching that kind of very rowdy political content, I still very much appreciate the influence that he had on me. I joined some atheist meetup groups in London and I looked more into secular humanism and just became really proud to call myself an atheist. I almost view it as a strong badge of honor, like, I'm an atheist, Zarina the atheist. Yet underneath all of this, a part of me still craved and desired some form of spirituality, something that transcended the purely physical, materialistic world. While I appreciated the very rational and fact-based ideas around atheism, it does still typically go hand in hand with materialism, which is the idea that the physical world is all that there is. Most atheists, not all, but most, reject any form of spirituality and anything that transcends the physical world, With atheism, I rejected astrology, reincarnation, past lives, anything extrasensory and mystical, and really became a bit ambivalent towards all of that, which made me feel kind of empty inside. I felt like I had to choose between being an atheist who rejected everything or believing in a more classical theistical form of God. It's a shame that Western society presents religion and atheism as the two main options, even though lots of people are neither religious nor atheists, and they do have their own spiritual beliefs and spiritual conceptions of some form of God that really have nothing to do with the Abrahamic ideal of God and faith. When I was 19, due to about a year of quite self-destructive drinking, I started attending Alcoholics Anonymous, which slowly opened me back into my spiritual beliefs that I had had as a teenager. Initially, I was very resistant because AA can almost thrust spirituality onto you, which I found very overwhelming. The word God and for the grace of God is everywhere in the rooms. Even though AA is not technically affiliated with Christianity or any religion and does specify a God of your understanding in the 12 steps, it does take much of its philosophy and approach to recovery from Christianity. In the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, which I have very mixed feelings towards, there is a chapter called We Agnostics, which I always found rather condescending towards agnostics and atheists. Upon reading that chapter, I expected it to be supportive of agnostics and say that you don't necessarily need to believe in a higher power to recover from addiction, but instead of that, it pretty much says that rejecting any form of belief in a higher spiritual power means that you won't be able to recover from your addiction. So you basically must accept a form of God or else you're basically screwed. This was very conflicting for me. And when I was about 2 years sober and moved back to London after university, I found some atheist and agnostic AA meetings, which I almost exclusively attended for the following year. Had I not found them, I don't think I would have continued to go to AA. I do think that the emphasis on God and a higher power can be very difficult and off-putting for many people, especially young newcomers who are early in their recovery and don't want to deal with any of the God stuff. It's a massive problem in the 12-step community, and I do have my personal views on it, and it's a big reason of why I stopped going to AA. But I do think that had it not been for the AA Agnostica circle, I would have really struggled to continue going to AA, which is a shame because AA is a wonderful thing and it has given me so much. I learned far more from going to AA meetings and doing the 12 steps than I ever learned in school. I learned how to be calmer. I learned how to really listen to people. I learned how to minimize my ego, be more open-minded, more accepting of alternate ways of thinking, and so on. There is a lot of good in AA, and I would say religion in general, but the more totalistic aspects of it can be very challenging. For example, it subtly assumes that once you get better and have been sober for a while and done all of the 12 steps, you're still kind of expected to keep on attending meetings even if your length of sobriety has surpassed your length of drinking. There is very much that culture of people expecting you to kind of just stick around in AA forever rather than getting well and moving on with your life. I get that part of this culture is for sponsorship and for interacting with the newcomers, but for myself, because my drinking was so brief, it only lasted about a year and a half. Once I started to feel better and had a pretty good grasp on my recovery, I say after maybe 2.5 years, I really just felt so conflicted, and it was like, I just don't want to do this anymore. I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel happy here anymore. I am quite fortunate in that I have an amazing sponsor who has always sat there and listened to me try and argue my way out of things and never imposed anything on me or told me what to do. For example, there's a lot of sort of insistence in AA, like don't have a relationship in your first year of recovery. Well, I didn't follow that. Don't do any other drugs. Didn't follow that either. Still doing green from time to time. Go to 3 meetings every week for 5 years. Yeah, not doing that. There's a lot of things that I didn't do that I don't do, and I was able to work with my sponsor and around my very headstrong tendencies while also learning how to be calmer and realizing that I don't know everything and I am not right all of the time. Which now brings me to the present day. I stopped regularly attending AA 3 years ago and have only been to 1 meeting in the last 3 years, which I actually talked about on my author channel. Since stopping going, my spiritual growth has massively expanded. AA gave me a good baseline to get back into my spirituality, but I have had to go out and seek a lot of things for myself. I read Waking Up by Sam Harris, who, along with Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens, is one of the most important figureheads in the whole New Atheist movement. That book is amazing. It's all about seeking spirituality without religion, and it talks a lot about meditation and tapping into your higher consciousness and so on. I also read about half of a book that my sponsor got me called A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps, which I recommend to any woman in 12-step recovery because the kind of AA big book is very, very male-centric, so it can feel a bit, I guess, isolating for women at times. So yeah, A Woman's Way Through the 12 Steps, great book. Through meditating, doing tarot readings, and learning how to become more present, I've completely re-entered the entire realm of spirituality. I believe wholly again in astrology, I believe in psychics, tarot, extrasensory perception, souls, spirits, the divine, energy, all of it. I even have my cards, as you can see. Yeah. I know that a lot of this stuff does sound insane to many people, but to me it's amazing, and it is something that I plan to look even deeper into as I go on through my life. I don't think I'll ever become extreme with it, as again, I don't think that that is a good thing at all. I'm very much against dogma, but this does all provide me with a very good baseline for my faith. I have faith in what we don't see and in what lies beyond the physical world, and that to me is a form of faith. As for God, I believe that God is really a placeholder term for whatever you view as greater than you, and I really think that God just means whatever you want it to mean. It's a very subjective term. My essential conception of God now is that God is everything. I'm a pantheist. And I remember years ago, a boyfriend I had who was actually Christian, not extreme Christian, very, very liberal Christian, asked me if I was a pantheist, which may have been the first time I heard this term, as I was telling him that I was kind of spiritual and I meditated a lot, and they spoke a lot about spirituality in AA, and he was like to me, oh, so you like a pantheist? And I was like, no, I'm an atheist. But now I've decided, yes, pantheist is definitely the term that suits me the most. Pantheism believes that God is not something that is above us. God is everything. The total sum of the universe is God, and everything is interconnected, weaving itself together in these beautiful flows of energy. I'm really not a fan of this hierarchical idea of a God as being something above us that we should all worship, because unfortunately I believe that this can be used by people making themselves into the symbol of God on earth and saying you must worship and bow down to us. This is also why I don't really like the idea of monotheism and one God above all of us, because to me, one God just translates to one government and totalism, and that this is the one true path. And I think that we all have our own path, and it's like, here's a path which you can take, which sounds nice, and you can follow it and connect to your conception of God as you choose. And I really do think that Christ himself was actually saying that. He was saying, choose your own path and follow that which makes you good and forgiving. And this is why I do respect Christ a lot as a person. He was really very much like the Buddha, as well I see it anyway. I have read up on Buddhism, on Stoicism, a little bit on Taoism, and I really like these more esoteric approaches to spirituality and faith. I have considered becoming a Buddhist, although I'm not sure if I could ever truly follow a religion, as I do very much like to do my own thing. I don't really like being told what to do. I don't really like labels. I think prefer to use these philosophies as more of a guide to life and to give me a lot of practical sense as well, as there's a lot of practical wisdom within Stoicism, and essentially take what is helpful and use that to help me out and live a good life. Because at the end of the day, I don't think that people need organized religion to tell them what to do. I think that we all have a mind and we can think for ourselves, and we don't need to say, I'm a Christian or I'm a Buddhist or I'm this or I'm that. I mean, I do get it. I know people like to align themselves with these ideals, but for me, this is a bit limiting, and it can cause a lot of problems in the world, because when we attach ourselves to ideologies, they can become fundamentalist, and that's the problem with feminism. I do believe that each of us is on our own path, and how we go about processing through that path is what is beautiful. I believe in oneness. I believe that we're all connected, that we are all energy made of stars, and that we can never truly die because energy can only ever be transferred. I used to not believe in free will, and now I do. I believe that obviously while on the scientific level our universe is deterministic, we are still souls freely choosing our own path, and we have many paths in front of us, and it's about choosing whichever one makes the most sense to us. I think we have to work with the will of the universe, of that which is greater than ourselves, while also listening to our higher consciousness. I also think that drugs can be helpful in gaining better spiritual consciousness and development. I know that sounds controversial, but smoking more weed regularly over the past several months has really helped me to develop and fine-tune my spiritual awakening. I feel more connected, more grateful, and I don't see myself smoking weed forever. Weed isn't really like alcohol or drugs like cocaine. It works on a more spiritual level, I find. Same with psychedelics, which I haven't taken yet, as I'm still on antidepressants, although hoping to start coming off them soon. I have been on them since I was 19. And yeah, definitely as I've been becoming more spiritual and more spiritually awakened, I'm starting to feel like I don't really need to be taking antidepressants anymore. With becoming more spiritual, I have rejected a lot of the anger and noise and extreme political divisiveness that exists out there. I prefer watching educational, philosophical, or spiritual YouTube content nowadays. Well, that and film analyses. Some of my favourite YouTube channels to watch now are Pursuit of Wonder, Eiselganger, I don't know how to pronounce his name, and The Spirit Nomad. They all make this more kind of spiritual and philosophical content, which I enjoy very much. The Spirit Nomad is wonderful, and she and her partner also have a channel called Twin Flame Guides, which I'm not really so much into anymore, this idea of twin flames, but I do think that for personal spiritual development, it is very helpful. Actually, finding that channel kind of led me to a lot of the other stuff. It led me to her Spirit Nomad channel, so yeah, everything is connected. All is one. I am really enjoying developing myself spiritually and essentially going down this path and following in the will of the universe, as also as thinking for myself and all that. I'm seeing the nuances within spirituality and how different people connect with different forms of consciousness above them. True spirituality isn't really supposed to be about everyone believing the same thing or everyone being expected to conform to what the state wants or what the church wants or what some institution wants. To me, true spirituality is about openness and accepting of that which is greater than us. And atheism seems to be the only ideology which rejects everything. And while I do respect atheists and have nothing against atheism as a whole, after all, I did used to be an atheist, I do find it a bit too spiritually limiting, and I think that ultimately atheism for me just wasn't enough. I really needed something more, something deeper. What do you think? Do you identify with any form of spirituality? Do you follow a certain faith? Or are you a total atheist who rejects any form of spirituality and thinks that it's all nonsense? I won't be offended either way, as I have pretty much been through it all at this point. Theism, agnosticism, atheism, and now pantheism. So let me know below, and thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do consider subscribing to stay up to date with the content that I post, and also consider joining my Discord group, Liberals Against Feminism, to discuss feminism and various ideas with like-minded people.